Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, and there's a space on your handout, I believe, at the top for you to take notes. We're going to go over the characteristics of each, and then I'll show you some artists. I'm going to go through the artists pretty quickly, because after this you're going to select your own artworks that you would like to learn more about individually. So the major characteristics of Impressionism, they often worked en plein air, which means in the outdoors. So a lot of artists previously worked in the studio, and they would paint from memory or from a model or something like that. The Impressionists, a lot of their paintings deal with nature, and so they want to work right in front of nature. They want to be immersed in it and paint directly what they see. A lot of their paintings also use vibrant color, and they tried to capture an impression or snapshot of a scene. So for example, they want to capture something as it looks in a certain time, certain lighting conditions, certain weather, that kind of thing. And so the content of their artwork includes mostly landscapes and everyday life scenes. And here's a list of some of the artists that we're going to go over real briefly: Pizarro, Monet, Renoir, Degas, and more so. And you can pause and discuss the article and talk about why are they called Impressionists. So I'm going to go through each artist, like I said, pretty quickly. I don't think you need to write down all the details about each artist. If you want to, you could list their names. So the first one is Pizarro. He promoted en plein air painting. So again, painting in the out of doors and trying to capture the changing effects of light on nature. And he really encouraged his fellow Impressionist artists to not worry so much about the rules, kind of like you read about in the article of painting, but instead to paint with larger brushstrokes and really be more expressive through their artwork. And so this attitude really influenced a lot of other Impressionists. So here's an artwork by Pizarro. You can really see the larger brushstrokes in this one. In this one, I think you can really see the use of color and the use of shadow to capture the actual lighting of the particular moment. And you can definitely see that here. And notice again that they include lots of scenes of nature and everyday life. The next one is Monet, and he was not the first Impressionist, but he was the first one to be sort of accepted by mainstream art and actually given the name Impressionist. He painted mostly nature and landscapes. Again, en plein air was very important to him, and he often painted the same scene day after day to capture the same scene but in different conditions. And I'll show you an example of that. This one I especially love. I just think it really shows the Impressionist use of color and the use of shadow, just how the trees in the foreground are so lit up compared to the background. This one, another landscape pic showing a sunrise. This one, I think too, it looks kind of almost like the brushstrokes look hurried, which to me kind of reflects the idea that they are trying to capture this scene in this exact moment before it fades away. And here's an example of how Monet would do studies of the same thing over and over. You can see here we have the same church painted in different weather and lighting conditions. And so he really wants to study how the environment impacts the light and the color and all of that. And he wants to capture that in each particular moment. And the same thing with the water lilies. Monet is really famous for his water lily paintings. And those, again, there's a lot of them, and they all look unique based on the particular time of day and the weather and that sort of thing. Here's another famous one, the bridge with the water lilies under it, which is actually part of Monet's garden at his home. The next artist we'll look at briefly is Renoir, and he used a lot of vibrant color and light. He often focused on people in his paintings and capturing just like a moment in life. And we'll see that he painted a lot of pictures with females in them. And he really captures people a lot of times like in their leisure activities, showing, I would say, kind of like the new middle class that came about as a result of industrialization. So in these two paintings I'll show you, you can see again, it's images of daily life and leisure activities. And I really feel like he's capturing here again, not to keep using this word, but a snapshot of this exact moment, what the people are doing, who's interacting with who. And we also see, if you look carefully at the people's clothing, the lighting. So like if you look at the people in the foreground, it kind of looks to me like there's a tree above them and the light is kind of filtering down through and making different patterns on their clothing based on the leaves. Here's another, and you can see again, just looking at this exact moment, just take a second and kind of, there's so much to look at, looking at what all the people are doing. This woman in the front, it looks like she's giving her dog a kiss. The woman in the background, just at that moment lifting the drink to her mouth. So again, he's capturing this one particular moment in everyday life. The next one is Degas. He is known for unusual viewpoints and sometimes kind of cropping a scene in a unique way, which supposedly is linked to his study or use also of photography. And so he's capturing an image where it looks like things definitely are extending beyond the view that we're seeing. Degas is probably most known for his painting of ballerinas, which he said he liked doing in part because they sold really well and he could actually make money off this artwork. Here's another one, and you can see the angles are kind of unique, like the way the floor is sloped up so much away from the viewer. And it definitely looks like a snapshot in terms of the fact that it's just a picture of the room capturing just one part of what all is going on. And the last impressionist we'll look at briefly is Morisot. Morisot had several works accepted into the official salon, but ended up joining up with the Impressionist movement. And she, I would say, is unique. Well, number one, she's a woman, but because of that, it's definitely reflected in her artwork. So the subject matter of her artwork represents the restrictions put on women at the time. So there's not really any nudes or street scenes. Most of her artwork centers around images of mother and children, everyday activities, the kinds of things that women would really have access to. So as I go through these, you can see that subject matter reflected. So the next artistic movement is the Postimpressionist movement, which is from the 1880s on. So it comes just right after Impressionism. It's very similar to Impressionism, I would say, in terms of the brushstrokes, the emphasis on light and color. It just takes it even further. So they experiment even more with color and composition. There's more attention to form. Cézanne, who we'll look at in a minute, for example, really explores geometric shapes to represent the things that he sees. There's a lot of emotion represented in these works, often through color, and we'll look at Van Gogh as an example of that. And the Post-Impressionists are really looking to create a new reality rather than purely imitating objects. So for example, we see this especially in the work of Van Gogh. He's not interested in necessarily painting the exact colors as something appears in real life. And so he uses very vibrant color to get a certain message across to the viewer. So they start to move more from objective reality or trying to paint things exactly as they look in real life. The Impressionists, had already gone beyond that in terms of their brushwork and things like that. But the Post-Impressionists go even further. And the artists we'll look at real briefly are Cézanne, Van Gogh, Seurat, and Gauguin. So Cézanne, you can see he really emphasizes geometric form, and things are not painted, I would say, exactly as they look in real life. I mean, if you study like the perspective or the three-dimensional lines on this artwork, they're not necessarily they're far from perfect, I would say. And that's really not his point. He uses geometric shape to represent what he sees. And again, they're moving beyond representing things exactly as they appear in real life. Here's another one, the bathers, and you can see definitely the use of geometric shapes again. The people, in some ways, their figures are a little bit distorted or elongated. He's experimenting with shape and not trying to represent things exactly as they were in real life in front of him. And here's another where he's taking a scene of a village, and you can see how he's experimenting with representing nature and the trees and all the different greenery in different shapes rather than making them look, how we would traditionally think of trees as looking in real life. The next one is Vincent van Gogh, and in the bottom left corner you see a self-portrait of Van Gogh. This is probably his most famous painting, Starry Night, and Van Gogh really explores color a lot in his artwork to represent emotion. He also spent a lot of time in the countryside, so he continues that impressionist tradition of landscape painting and capturing a particular scene in nature. This one, I think you can really see how the post-impressionists push the boundaries in terms of color and light. The colors here are so vibrant, definitely moving beyond what this scene probably really looked like in real life. And then the last one is Paul Gauguin, and I can't remember if you have already studied him or are going to be studying him based on where you are in the year in terms of imperialism, but I'm going to talk more about Gauguin when we do imperialism, or maybe I already have, depending on where this falls. But he spent a lot of time in Tahiti, and so his artwork includes a lot of exotic themes, or that would have been very exotic to Europeans. So that's a quick overview of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. And now you're going to spend some time looking at some particular artworks that appeal to you and learning more about those specific examples.